I wanted to offer a few thoughts tonight about happiness. The title of the talk is Happiness, Seeking Goodness Everywhere. And it's the seventh in a long series on happiness, on 5 kinds of happiness. The happiness of, the first kind is the happiness of just sense pleasure. The second is the happiness of moral integrity. The third is the deva happiness, the happiness of kindness and compassion and equanimity and sympathetic joy. The fourth kind is mindfulness, and the fifth kind of happiness is concentration. And my intention, as I've told you all along, is to offer a long series on 5 kinds of happiness. And this is the 7th, and I'm still in the first one. As I said, it's going to be a long series. I seem to be, but we're kind of leaning now tonight into the second. So hopefully the next talk will be into the second kind of happiness. But seeking goodness everywhere. And I've been thinking a lot about the difficulties of our world, our local world, our community, our IMCC community, and just what our spiritual practice calls us to with all of these challenges and all of these difficulties. And so I wanted to speak to that a bit tonight. Again, I've touched on it a whole bunch of times, but I'm inspired by a teaching from Ajahn Sucitto, where he says the path, our spiritual path, is always one of bringing skillful conditions to bear. So that's kind of the theme, and one that I'll repeat quite a number of times through the night. The path, our spiritual path. I was thinking about that driving in. Driving. My spiritual path is always one of bringing skillful conditions to bear. Washing the dishes. My spiritual path is always one of bringing skillful conditions to bear. So even with difficulties or deep difficulties in our lives, our path is one of bringing skillful conditions to bear. And what exactly, my husband tonight at dinner asked me what I was going to teach about, and he said, what exactly is a skillful condition? And as he thought about it, he came up with quite a few. So the question is how to do this in a world that's just so full of problems, that's so full of difficulties, where we can get so easily swept away by them. We can imagine or hope that our spiritual life will somehow inoculate us. That either we won't have difficulties. We could have an imagination that if somehow we were spiritual enough, we wouldn't have difficulties. Or maybe they wouldn't affect us. They wouldn't hurt. They wouldn't be challenges. Or maybe even that we wouldn't stumble. That our spiritual life would be such that somehow we could kind of glide through or hold, that somehow all these teachings about happiness, that we could somehow kind of be happy over here with all that other stuff out there and kind of keep it out. And it will not surprise you terribly to know that's not really what our practices, our spiritual life is about. This is John Tarrant, who has a book, The Light Inside the Dark. He says, our lives seem to be going well. We seem to be doing things properly. We are not ignorant or unconscious. Yet things fall apart. Have you noticed that? There are common responses to this fall, each of which becomes an obstacle in itself. One is indignation, the thought that whatever pains are happening to us shouldn't be happening. And the other is despair, the thought that this is a special fate reserved only for me, which these two misunderstandings undermine the assumption that we can find a path beyond difficulty through our virtue and skill. So, we cannot. We cannot find a path through difficulty, beyond difficulty, through our virtue and skill. As Ajahn Sucitto says, the path is always one of bringing skillful conditions to bear. So this path that we're on is more about being able to be with our lives, to be with difficulty without becoming undone. Or to be with difficulty without becoming undone about becoming undone. About becoming undone. You know, to bring skillful conditions to bear with these difficulties, so that we're not adding to it, we're not unraveling, we're not collapsing in the midst of some of these difficulties. Our path invites us to not lose our access to qualities of mind and heart that are wholesome and that can help. So the difficulties invite us, often they even cause us, if you will. And when to lose our access to these wholesome qualities of mind and heart. And when they do, they are our training grounds. There are opportunities to practice. They're not mistakes. They're opportunities to practice, and that they are doorways that are inviting us to ever deeper realization of what constitutes happiness. So no matter what our response is to difficulty, they're invitations into deeper understandings and deeper realities. The path is always one of bringing skillful conditions to bear, noting, making much of, expanding, dwelling in skillful conditions, and letting them have their effect to dislodge our own unskillful habitual patterns. And so our inquiry is always just how to do this. Not like, trying to get it right and then we're bad people if we don't get it right or something like that. But can we use our difficulties as doorways? In this world that's so full of problems, and I was telling one of you, I was inspired in part by some of the difficulties I've been having lately. I just have been finding myself really kind of exhausted and a lot of emotional reactions to some of the challenges of both our city, ouch, the shootings, ouch. And in our little IMCC community, we've had we've had a tough year, guys, haven't we? You know? Or we've had a tough multiple years. We've been dealing with COVID, a new place, some of the technical challenges that we've had, and trying to kind of do this and this, you know. How do we do this? We've we've dealt with our loss of Jeff, who got angry and left in such a painful and damaging way. Ouch. Our loss of Pat, who disappeared. We don't know why. I don't know why. It's confusing, isn't it? Ouch. For me, there's grief, there's anger, there's loss, And so I've been just sort of sitting with that. And then as we've dealt with some other people who kind of just have gotten overwhelmed, and, some of the losses have then meant other people had to come in and pick up some of the pieces, and then they got overwhelmed and collapsed, and it just kind of cycles through in ways that are just really challenging for our little community. And so how do we bring skillful conditions to bear? In part, for starters, we notice. We notice the ouch. Philip Moffat talks about really feeling the ouches of it. So for starters, not trying to hold it, I'm trying to be happy over here. Let me not even notice what's going on out there, or better yet, let me not notice what's going on in here in terms of my own experience. I'll try to be holy and spiritual instead. So my problem, as I've struggled with it and realized, I thought of that Johnny Lee song, looking for love in all the wrong places, And I think the Buddha had a song like that, which was, looking for happiness in all the wrong places. That our challenge really is that we don't understand happiness, and we don't understand how to be with it and how to be with some of these difficulties. And we look for happiness in all the wrong places. That we look for happiness by trying to avoid the difficult. And that doesn't work. The path is always one of bringing skillful conditions to bear. Noting, making much of, expanding, dwelling in skillful conditions, and letting them have their effect to dislodge unskillful habitual conditions. Again, that's same quote from Ajahn Sucitto. And here's another quote that I found from William Saroyan. He says, "Seek goodness everywhere. And when it is found, bring it out of its hiding place and let it be free and unashamed." Seek goodness everywhere. Bring it out of its hiding place and let it be free and unashamed. Place in matter and in flesh the least of the values, for these are the things that hold death and must pass away. Discover in all things that which shines and is beyond corruption. Encourage virtue in whatever heart it may have been driven into secrecy and sorrow by the shame and terror of the world. So, seek goodness, discover that which shines and is beyond corruption, encourage virtue. bring skillful conditions to bear. This is all a bit of a lead in to the next talk, which I'll offer, which is on, I will go to the second kind of happiness, which is moral integrity. So it's a bit of a leaning into that next talk. But seek goodness, which is different from seeking pleasure. So happiness, seeking happiness is different from seeking pleasure. And we've talked about that a whole bunch over the last 7 talks. And I want to note also that goodness is also different from views. It's another whole talk, but we could notice that sometimes the mind has very strong opinions about what goodness is, especially for you. Not for me so much, but for you. And very strong opinions about what should be. And so that's not what we mean either by goodness. That we get very attached to our views about how things are supposed to be. I have some views about how things are supposed to be, or are supposed to have been over the past year in IMCC. But that's not going to get much of any distance. So it's much deeper than that. And so my question for you is my husband's question for me tonight, and I gave it back to him. I said, okay, what? Is this, what does it mean to seek goodness? Huh? What does it mean when Ajahn Suchito says, bring skillful conditions to bear? So I want to talk about that a little bit. I wanted to just have a little discussion about what does it mean? Seek goodness, bring skillful conditions to bear when it's difficult. And what you might do as you contemplate this is to think about a difficulty that you know of or are experiencing, and then to contemplate. What does it mean to seek goodness with that? So I want to pause there for a minute because I'd like to hear from you. And I think, Rachel, correct me, I think we can do this with all of us together. Is that right? I get 2 thumbs up. That looks like really we can do it with all of us together. So I want to ask you, what comes up for you when you contemplate skillful conditions with, fill in the blanks, whatever it is? What qualities of heart and mind occur to you? So bringing skillful conditions to bear. Things like presence, kindness, intention, you've mentioned, patience, holding things lightly, letting go of views. You've mentioned some really important and beautiful considerations, and then we can kind of have that be an inquiry. I mean, really, as we drive down the street, bringing skillful conditions to bear. I wanted to offer the rest of the meditation. I want to offer a little bit of guidance. So let's move to that. And we can move to that, as you consider what you've heard, you've offered, or what other people have offered about skillful conditions. And many of you have referenced this. One of the skills is to deliberately practice perceptions that have a wholesome flavor to them. To really seed them in our consciousness so that they're available. So we can practice seeding these qualities of mind and heart without requiring ourselves to do anything in particular with them. We could even notice that as perhaps not such a skillful quality of mind and heart, where as soon as we see something, we think, oh, I need to get better at this, or I need to do this. But really simply cultivating. Bev at the beginning was talking about cultivating little trees and little plants. And we're doing the same thing in our own minds and hearts. So one of the important themes is to cultivate perceptions that give rise to patience and presence and lightness and kindness and care, gratitude, devotion, forgiveness, ease, contentment, feeling pleased or grateful. To make much of these experiences, to drink them in, to enjoy them. So bring to mind, recollect, if you will, bring an image, or maybe it's an emotion of kind of a felt sense of one of these skillful qualities of mind and heart. I have a particular image that I can go to from when I was actually quite young that automatically takes me to a deep quality of happiness and care and ease. Bring an image and let it be more than a thought. We could have sort of a superficial thought that, like I really like being at the beach or whatever. But see if you can actually bring the image, the experience of it into your awareness. Noticing what is it like for you to directly experience even a tiny bit. We're not requiring you to climb Mount Everest here, but even a tiny bit of that quality of mind and heart that is wholesome. How is it in your body? Is there any quality of happiness in the mind, in the heart? And if there is, even a tiny bit, see if you might let yourself soak in it. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to make it better. But could you allow yourself to simply soak in it, to take it in, experience it, feel it in the body, Enjoy it. Ajahn Suchita has a word that I like, which is linger. He says, let yourself linger in that experience. The way a tea bag might linger in that warm cup of water. So we can practice taking the opportunity to be nourished, to be touched, to linger in goodness, to seek goodness, as William Saroyan says, and to linger in it, as Ajahn Suchito invites us. Notice any qualities in the body, in the heart and mind and body, and is there any slowing? Is it easier to be present? Harder? Is there any warmth? Are the edges maybe just a tiny bit softer? If so, enjoy it. Again, you don't have to be worthy of it or do anything with it or have it be better. There's just this. Anyway, this is a poem that Helen sent to me. It's called Beginners. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud. So may we take our buds individually, collectively. Thank you all for your sharing. It's just a real gift. So blessings.